Let's now bring in our SABC News anchor, Thembekile Mrototo, who is with senior reporter Canny Maphanga. Thembekile, more concessions then at the commission after denying his involvement. IDAC head of investigations, Sesoko, now conceding that in fact he was, involved in some of those, investigations. He was seen in a number of meetings, and he was also taken through a number of those documentations. Just bring us through then in terms of what has been the main, highlights of this particular, testimony today, given the fact that he has now concluded his testimony.
Onati, good afternoon again. So the polite way to explain it is to say that Sesoko has basically conceded that what he told the Commission earlier regarding his involvement in these crime intelligence investigations. But ultimately what's happened here in the last hour is that the head of investigations at IDAC has been caught in a lie. He told the Commission this morning that ultimately he had been excluded from the investigations to do with crime intelligence by advocate Andrea Johnson, who was the head of IDAC at the time. And he said that based on his experience within that sort of environment, when he was left out and not informed of how this investigation was going, he basically chose to mind his own business and did not ask, because that was the way in which the office operated, right? So what is interesting is that notes taken by Drushanta Ramsamy, also from IDAC, who testified here just yesterday, in fact, also put Sesoko in the room at a meeting where ultimately there was this conversation, this covert, if you will, discussion around misleading the police commissioner, Fanny Masemola, in the hopes that he would then go to Parliament with the wrong information and then be caught up in that way. There's also the thread around Sesoko and Cedric Ngabinde, who was the chief of staff in Minister Senzo Mchulu's office. They have a history from when they worked at IPID together. But now we know that Sesoko, from the evidence presented today, was part of the investigation, a fishing expedition, an underhanded, if you will, operation that looked into Ngabinde to find some sort of dirt after Andrea Johnson had said that when she met with him while waiting to meet with the police minister at his residence, she had basically, you've heard the term, got the heebie-jeebies, basically felt uncomfortable around Ngabinde, and that is what birthed that apparently ulterior sort of investigation. Let's bring in SABC News senior reporter Canny Maphanga with me now. So Canny, for the head of IDAC's investigations unit to be caught basically in a lie is quite a significant thing, right?
Absolutely. So the picture that we got is that he was completely a bit on the outside in terms of the investigations, or at least the ones that went into crime intelligence, because he did say there were areas where the investigations would go correctly and areas where there would be flaws, such as what we've seen so far with the alleged unlawful conduct that followed the matters into crime intelligence. But the communications with him and Advocate Ramsamy at the very least show that at all times he knew what was being discussed, and the implication there is that he knew what the investigations were about, and he still stood by and did nothing when it was quite clear that there was alleged unlawful conduct taking place. And even to the extent that he even concedes, he told Ramsamy that her problem started when she challenged basically Dylan Perrimal, who Johnson listens to. So he's confirming the dynamics as stated by Rapesu and Ramsamy, but he didn't act. What's most jarring about his evidence is that he seeks to portray himself as someone that had no power to act. But he's very different from Ramsamy and Rapesu in the fact that those were just investigators and prosecutors. They didn't hold positions in terms of the power dynamics and the structure. With him, he was actually the head of investigations. It is expected that if you're going to take up a role of that particular kind and nature, that you should be able to speak up, or are you just going to sit back every time an unlawful instruction takes place? He's one of the officers, or rather the IDAC personnel that still remains in his position. He's not suspended. We know Dylan Perrimal is, Brian Pareachi is, Johnson resigned from her post, but he's still there. And if you're going to hold such a position, the expectation is that where you see the prescripts being subverted, that you do stand up and stick up for what is right in that particular moment. Another jarring point is the Ngabinde reference. It seems that he tried to state that he had warned Ramsamy about Ngabinde because of that particular investigation rather that she was taking on. But it seems that there is a bigger history between the pair that could have allegedly informed why this matter was pursued in the manner that it was pursued, or at least that's the investigation against it, because he holds quite strong views against Cedric Abinde, accuses him of being allegedly dishonest in the handling of the Blue Lights matter by allegedly colluding with the suspect. So that's a very serious claim to make about an individual, and I don't know if you can separate that with the kind of pursuit that this particular unit took towards Cedric Abinde. So there's a lot of problems that is emerging from the IDAC evidence. We know that it's far from done because Ramsamy must return, and the greater question is this unit something that can be salvaged? Is it something that you can apply reforms to, or do you need a complete overhaul, or do you simply just disband this unit? Because it looks like the powers that were afforded to the ID and the investigators were allegedly abused to serve particular interests, and had it not been for the probe by the Madlanga Commission, then none of this stuff would have come out, and who knows who could have been the next victim to this alleged subversion of the law in order to serve particular interests.
Just on the crime intelligence issues, I mean, we talk about how Sesoko was in the loop, but ultimately the chairperson of the commission also noted that at some point he wasn't a passive participant. In fact, he himself asked questions and was involved in some of the logistics around conversations around the arrests of people and how that would go down.
Absolutely. It's implausible to try and suggest that you were completely far removed. I mean, Johnson tried the same strategy, but the emails, the chats, the WhatsApp chats and the investigations themselves always catch up with these witnesses, because it shows that you knew something about what was taking place and you still didn't take action. And if you didn't take action, the next logical inference is that you were part of these alleged operations. And it is that lens upon which the Commission must look at you, because at the very least he is in those communications rather long before the operation takedown, which means he had a clear idea of what was going on. And even worse, these investigations fell outside of the prescripts, didn't even meet the requirements for a Section 27 referral, and you saw that the rules were being bent completely in order to allegedly target these high-ranking generals. And that's part of the crux of the problem with IDAC's handling or interest in the crime intelligence division.
Did Senzo Mkhunu trust Cedric Abinde, who was his chief of staff?
Well, we'll have to find out when Mkhunu arrives to return for his testimony, but it's quite bizarre to hear that evidence now, and that the Chief of Staff is probably one of the most trusted political roles you can serve in terms of that particular office, and for it to be turned around to say that after the meeting that they wanted him investigated, surely there must have been something that could have raised the eyebrows of Mkhunu for that development to have taken place after the meeting at the residence. Although Ramsamy admits that she doesn't know what was discussed at the meeting, we just know the timeline upon which it coincides and what was happening with the PKTT, but also there's the Cedric Abinde element that must now be explored as to what really informed the need for IDAC that is fighting high-level corruption to try and find something or get quote-unquote dirt on Cedric Abinde following a meeting that its former head had at the residence of Police Minister Senzo Mkhunu.
Canny Maphanga, SABC News senior reporter, thank you very much for that. The Madlanga Commission will not sit tomorrow, Friday. That's because the chairperson, the retired Justice Madlanga, has a prior commitment that he said he had taken on when he thought that the Commission's public hearings would have ended at the end of July. We know now they've got an extension to November to do some of the work that the Commission still has to deal with. And on Monday, they will not sit because that is, as was pointed out by the evidence leader, Advocate Bowe, Women's Day. And that is why we will only come back to the Brigitte Mabandla Justice College at 9:30 on Tuesday morning next week.